70% of the population are generators or manifesting generators. So most people are generators, and they are able to build and to have this sustainable energy. So they are designed for, your 9-to-5 job, and they do have the energy to do that. But the key is to follow what they love. And if they don't, it can lead to frustration. And if they are really following that path that brings them joy and they're really connecting back to that, it can lead to a lot of satisfaction. And there's nothing more satisfying to a generator than having, a job and a work that you love, and also relationships that are really fulfilling to you.
Hello and welcome to the Soul Career. My name is Marketa and I'm your host. I'm the person behind this channel, behind this podcast. At this point in my journey, I am a career coach, but I landed on this path through becoming a recruiter first. I was in recruitment for quite a few years for a variety of positions and levels of positions. And as much as people need certain skills to land a job, you really realize how the difference in attitude of people who came to get a job for survival and the people who are actually really trying to get fulfilled in their careers. After finishing my time as recruitment, this became my mission. I really want to help those people who have been through the survival period, right? They understand what it's like to just get that job, who just want to make sure that their family is going to survive. And sometimes they need to feed that ego a little bit, right? They have been on this path. But now they no longer want to just survive. They actually want to thrive. They understand that thriving career is going to help them with their fulfillment, and they no longer want a job. They actually want a real career. So I'm here for those of you who feel that way. If this is your cup of tea, please tune in, whether it is in this episode, in this video, or any other of my channel, and let's get in touch. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you, and I cannot wait for us to get to know each other a little bit closer. Hello and welcome to the Soul Career. I am your host Marketa, and I'm here today with an amazing guest, Nicole Towers. Welcome, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy. It took us a few months to get this coordinated, but I'm so happy that we are doing this right now. Nicole is a human design reader and human design expert, and I was so drawn to her and asking her to be on this podcast because of the way how she explains. I guess I'm more of I love high-level conversation, as we were discussing before this podcast, but I love how you bring it back on earth and actually explain it in a way that one can right away go and apply to their life.
Yes. That's something that I really think is I do that intentionally, because you can, as we were talking about before, you can really dive deep into a lot of the different aspects of human design and dive really deep into, your incarnation cross, your channels, gates, and all these different things. But if you don't have the main things like your type, the way your aura interacts with others, your energy, your strategy, and your authority, if you don't really understand those really well, then you're not going to be able to really embody it, and it's going to be very intellectualized and in the mind rather than actually experimenting with it. And that's what I love. Like, human design is an experiment. So it's about trying it on and seeing what feels good for you. And if it feels amazing, and if you're having a lot of success and satisfaction and all these beautiful things, then go ahead and keep trying and experimenting with it. So, and I think practically is really important, because otherwise you're really, as I mentioned, like in the mind more. So
yeah, because it's, in a way, it's like with any topic, right? Like, let's say someone wants to get into workout, you're not gonna at the beginning give them a crazy workout routine for somebody who has been doing it for 10 years, right? You need to, again, start from the beginning, explain how exactly you do that squat, that you have your knees in the right place, etc., etc. So even though I already have had on this podcast and a few episodes about human design, as I really, really enjoy the way how you're explaining it from this like elementary place, let's say, I would love if we could just start really from the beginning, really start from the basics. And if we could have a look at just very simply explaining what is actually human design.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of an esoteric system, really. And if you're, into sort of things like the Enneagram and things like that, they're personality tests that are really monitored on what your answers are, Whereas with human design, it's similar to the astrology natal chart, if you're familiar with that, but it's all to do with where you were actually born, the date, time, and place of birth. And then a chart is generated. So you can actually download a free chart. You could try mybodygraph.com or geneticmatrix.com, or a couple of great ones. If you've got all of those, that information, you can just enter it in and this chart will be generated. And this chart is like, it's right, this like a GPS to the way that you're supposed to navigate your life with more intention and more ease and flow. So a lot of the time, before we understand our human design, we can actually be operating as a different human design type, and it can, lead to a lot of, these not self themes. So basically, this chart is, you could have 5 different human design types, and with that, there's so much information that you can dive deep into. And yeah, I just love looking at it. But if you print it out to start with, it can look quite confusing because, there's a lot of centers, and it's different ancient wisdoms that come together to form this map. So it's astrology, it's the Kabbalah, it's also the chakra system and different modalities, and they all come together to make this map of your chart, and that's how your body is designed to flow with this energy. So yeah, there's a lot that you can go into, but it's something that I found really helps my clients, and I work with a lot of, in terms of like business clients, but it really helps them to navigate their life with a lot more ease and flow, as I mentioned. So yeah.
Yes, and that's also why I really wanted to talk to you, and why I'm so obsessed with this topic, because it has been a game changer for me in my life, in my business, in my career in general. For anyone listening right now, maybe if you are completely new to this, maybe this is a good time to pause and quickly go to mybodygraph.com and just get your chart. Did you pause? Did you come back? Okay. And now let's really start from the place of why we are generally having this discussion today. As you mentioned, this human design chart, it's gonna act for you like a GPS, and it can help you navigate your life in general. And whether it's going to be you wanting to start your business, you trying to understand how to act in your current work environment, maybe you're not feeling completely fulfilled. Maybe Nicole will help you discover right now that you have been acting like a different type, as you mentioned. Let's have a look at the 5 different energy types. And maybe with this, we're gonna dive deeper on each of them and how they should make decisions, and how, in order to live a more fulfilling and more flowy life.
Yeah, so I'll start with the types because, in terms of making decisions, that can be a little bit different depending. Some of the authorities cover like multiple types. So I'll start with the types. So if you are a manifestor, you are really here to innovate, to lead, to light the spark of new things. So if I would to start with talk about the different types and how they work together, firstly, we need all types in humanity to work harmoniously together. So if the manifestor was here to light the spark of new ideas, the generator and the manifesting generator would be here to build and create what they love, and actually use their consistent energy to build that life force, workforce energy to create. And then the projectors would be here as the guides to oversee how things could be done more efficiently, and to really guide others and not be really conditioned to be using their energy for output, but more for directing energy and for leading people as well. And then there's the reflectors on top, which oversee a whole project. So if they were to work together on, say, a project in a corporate, business, then the reflectors would be there to oversee how things could be done in a more efficient way, and to really reflect back that wisdom to others. So that's how all the energies sort of work together. And I like to sort of explain that so you can sort of understand it before we dive into each of the types with more detail. But the manifestors, sorry,
that's already so good, because even how you I was visualizing them as a team, which is so beneficial, because I don't think that there's one person listening who has never been part of a team. And if you observe the team, you can really feel how everyone has a little bit of a different role. And you really feel how weird it is if someone is trying to get into someone else's role. And in a way, that's how it is in life as well, right? Like, some people are natural born leaders. I see it with my partner. He's a manifester. He walks into a room and everyone notices him. And I feel, and I didn't used to like it. It made me feel a little bit ashamed. And now it's kind of like who I am and I enjoy it. I come into a room and I sit in the corner and I just like look around. And then I have a conversation with one person. It's so interesting, these things.
Yeah.
And it used to make me feel weird. It used to make me feel like I'm not enough because how come other people get noticed? But at the same time, I don't feel comfortable being center of attention within the room. So it's just kind of like you embody the role. And I don't mean to say it as a role in a sense of like, this is your destiny and this is how you're going to be and you cannot change anything about you, but just understanding your natural tendencies and kind of like falling back in love with yourself, right? Like you are already perfect the way you are. And if you're going to operate in that way, you're going to realize how much you're actually enjoying your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perspective. And really, when you lean into your design more, it does feel amazing when you actually understand how that works and how you can interact with others. It's allowed me to lean back more and really observe more. And, when I speak, I find people listen more than before when I was trying to, help everyone because I could see how things could be done better. And I'd go straight in and say, oh, I think you should be doing this. Whereas now I wait for the invitation. And that's part of my strategy as a projector, is waiting for that invitation. And when it doesn't have to be, a letter in the post, it can just be a verbal or, visual cue, and someone leans forward and smiles. And as I'm talking, then I could say, would you like my perspective on that? And it's met with not resistance like it used to be. It's met with a lot of openness and really people seeking my opinion on things now. Because the more I lean back, the more people lean in. And isn't that incredible that, you can really start living with your design rather than like forcing things to happen and initiating things to happen when that might not be what is best for you. Even though in society as conditioning, we're all designed to just do it, just make things happen. But really, as we were talking about your partner as well, like the manifestors are designed to do that, to gain attention, when they walk into a room. So yeah,
exactly. I love what you said, like how in the society it might be conditioned that we should be acting a certain way in order to be successful, etc., etc. And you're gonna have a lot of well-meaning books, well-meaning YouTube videos, well-meaning leaders who will tell you this is how I became a leader and that's how you need to do it. And again, I really feel that the people mean very well, but there is still missing the link of, for people like me, this is how it's working.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I really got into business coaching through the lens of human design, because I'd had a lot of business coaches that were teaching me the strategies and the formulas that worked for them and the frameworks. And it didn't work for me as a projector because they were the different human design type. And even sometimes I didn't even try them because it just felt inauthentic to me.
Yeah.
So now I really dive deep into the individual's energy and their design and how they're meant to work and help them to build these frameworks that support them, that support their type and their energy, and to really look at energetic maintenance as well, because so many of us are using our energy inefficiently. So we're, doing things for the sake of doing it and doing the busy work when, particularly for sacred beings, they're generators and manifesting generators. I find a lot of them have, perceived obligations and they do things because they think they should be rather than really wanting to do them. And because you have the energy to do it, people start to expect that from you. And here comes the people pleasing, it's this sort of cycle.
I'm feeling exposed.
Oh dear. It's definitely a trait that I've seen a lot in generators and manifesting generators.
So we took a little bit of a detour. Let's come back to back to each different types. Exactly.
Yeah, sure. So as I was saying, the manifestors are really here to innovate. They're not really here to be the followers. So this is something that, they might be conditioned to. I quite often see as children as manifestors, they are conditioned that they're too much or too loud, and then they hold back their voice, and they're really designed to speak and lead people and have these amazing innovative ideas that have never been done before. But if they are conditioned not to share these ideas, then this can really lead to, you know, that not self theme of feeling anger, a sense of anger from, and even that can be repressed anger. It can form into depression as well when they're repressing what they're here to speak. So a lot of the time with manifestors, they really have to recognize that they are here, and once they really recognize that and start to, you know, follow their creative urges and not downplay them and share their voice, then it really leads to that signature theme of peace. And when I'm talking about these not self and signature themes, I'll just explain them because I'll go through them as I speak about each type. They're really your warning signs for being in or out of alignment. So if you are feeling, when I say a not self theme, it's like a feeling that can come up for you when you're not on the right track, when you're being met with resistance, and when you're following, you know, a path that isn't right for you. Then the signature theme is really about the feeling that you feel when you're in alignment. So as I mentioned, the manifesting generator, this feeling of anger can come up when you're feeling like, you know, sometimes I find that manifesting generators, when they're being interrupted from their creative flow, they just want to get their stuff done and they want to work on their own. And what happens is, if they're not sharing with others, you know, like for instance, if your partner just goes ahead and does lots of things without sharing that with you, you can be kind of feeling like you're a bit left out. So all he has to do is communicate. But quite often manifestors are conditioned not to communicate because they just want to do their own thing and be left alone to do their creative, you know, urges and, you know, do what they want to do. But instead, really part of their strategy is to really inform others. And that can really help them to get that signature theme of peace and that alignment, because other people know what they're going to do before they do it. And the main reason for this is because they move so quickly. So they can start and initiate an idea and follow it through into action at super fast speeds. So it can, you know, other people, if they're on a team, for instance, in a workplace, we'll give that example. If they're in a team, they can go ahead and, you know, follow tasks and no one knows what they're doing and they're not informing and communicating, then it can be met with resistance. And then, you know, it's this sort of follow on a circle, really. So it's really important for them to inform so others can support them and be on board with what they're here to do. And the people that will be on board with them will be really on board with them. And, you know, they're not meant to, you know, attract everyone. So some people will, you know, meet a little bit of resistance with manifestors because they won't understand that energy. And it is a powerful energy. So it can really sometimes repel others, but the ones that are really on board will be so on board and they'll love what they do and they'll be really inspired and activated and motivated by manifestors.
I love that. What would be an advice you would give to somebody who is a manifestor and they feel like they do not want to inform because they feel like people will try to sway them in different directions, etc., etc.? They have been conditioned, which you said, like not to inform.
To experiment with it, to really experiment with informing others, and remember that informing isn't asking for permission. And I think that's a big thing to see the difference between, because if you feel like you're asking permission, then it's up to someone else. You're keeping the power and you're saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, or this is what I'm intending to do. And it's important to have this conversation before you do it. So just let someone know that you're going to be doing this and this is where you're headed. And I'd love your support with this. I'd love you to be on board with this with me. But either way, this is what I'm going to be doing. So it gives other people an opportunity to know what they're going to be doing. So I know that can be a bit different in the workplace, but if they are in a leadership position, which they are designed to be in, then this could be a great way to inform the people that they're working with so they can be on board and they can, you know, help them to carry out that task. And another thing to remember is that they are not always here to carry out the task. They might start and initiate the idea, and then other people might be the ones to follow that through and see it to completion, because they don't have sustainable energy. They have energy that flows with a lot of energy all at once, and then they have rest periods. So it's really important for them to rest as well. So sometimes with these traditional workplaces can be difficult for you know, manifestors, projectors and reflectors, because they don't have the consistent energy. So it's hard for them to sometimes feel like they're always going to be measured on their output. So and that's the important thing. If you understand if you're a manager, or if you've got a business, if you understand the energy types of the people that work for you, or even each other, it's going to allow you to work in harmony and play to your strengths, because you can say, hey, I would love you as a manifestor to come up with some ideas for this campaign or whatever you're doing. And then they can go ahead and do what they do best, rather than saying, I want you to work 12 hours doing data entry now. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just not that anyone's going to love to do that, but that is really not going to be playing to their strengths.
Yeah, I absolutely get it. And it's interesting because the other podcast episode that we had on this topic with Melissa Ratti, I'm going to link it down below. It was exactly on this, like how to kind of like navigate teams as based on their human design. It was really, really good. And it's so amazing always to see different perspective of different people, even explaining very similar thing, because still everyone puts into it their own experience. And I love the words that you were using for that. Let's bring this back to the GPS analogy, because I feel like this is so good. So for manifestors, let's say they are feeling anger. So it's almost like the GPS telling them, I don't know how to do the GPS voice, but that you need to turn around, to go in the wrong direction. In the moment when they feel going in the right direction, is the feeling of, which one was that?
Peace.
Right. So they're feeling at peace. That's me like, okay, I'm heading into the right direction. And in order to move well, let's say, they would first inform, and then they would go ahead and drive.
And initiate. Initiate those ideas into action. That can feel really good if they're able to follow that through. And once they start practicing and experimenting with informing, that's going to feel better over time. It will feel hard to begin with. And when you get the support that you need, then you are going to be leaning more into that signature theme of peace. You're going to feel that an inner calm and a stillness, rather than feeling like anger or any of those sort of feelings, because you're just going ahead and doing the things and leaving all of these people feeling a bit unhappy, because because they want to feel like they're part of a team, or they want to feel like they matter as well, that you're going to let them know what they're doing, especially for those that are like around them, the close circle. Doesn't have to be everyone, but if you're on social media or anything like that, that could be, if you've got a business, you can inform what you're going to be doing before you create a new offer, for instance. It can work in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's a very good way of looking at it. That's why I really enjoy this system, because you can apply to anything. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I love the practical nature of it as well. I'm very logical, and my circuitry in human design is very logical. So as much as I love, I'm a 1-3, self-projector, and my dominant circuitry is logical.
Okay,
so as much as this is an esoteric system, I'm very into strategy, but aligned strategy. So I do like talking about strategy and the system and following that system. And a lot of, the things that I've studied has been, I studied health science, and really about the body and the human body. And then I dived into naturopathy, and then also journalism. So, really diving deep into studying and following fascinations and things like that.
I love it. I can so relate to it. I'm 5'1", so I'm sensing the ones.
Yes.
Amazing.
Investigators.
Exactly. Let's move on to the next type. Which one would you like to dive into next?
Yeah, let's talk about generators next.
Let's do it.
Generators are really here to build and create what they love. And they are really here to master skills as well. So niching can be good, like following something that they really love and following that and diving deep and being known as an expert in a certain area. So if they niche into something, that can be amazing for them. And what I find a lot with generators is, well, they do have this sustainable life force energy. So they do have consistent energy, but I sort of touched on it before about them sometimes being people pleasers and sometimes doing a lot of things, just because you can doesn't mean you should sort of motto really applies to them. And I've spoken to a few people about it, and they actually have that up on their wall to remind them, to sometimes that no is a complete sentence. They don't have to say yes, even if they have in the past. They don't always have to say yes to everyone. And that can be harder for them to do than for others to receive that. But a lot of the time you may have these obligations that you feel like you've got, and you've got to say yes to everyone. And you lose sight of what brings you joy and what really lights you up sometimes. As a child, that's something that a generator would be really following what they love, and an MG as well, a manifesting generator, following the things that bring them joy from going from one toy to the next. As you get older, the conditioning can set in, and you might feel like you have to, follow this path. You might be at a job that maybe is soul-sucking, but you feel like you have to because you've got to pay the bills, rather than thinking about what truly brings you joy, and that you can have both. You can have a job that you truly love and that lights you up. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So the more that you really follow that path that brings you joy, the more magnetic you are, and the more opportunities are going to come your way as well. They have a really warm nature. Sort of describe them as almost like, a beautiful warm cup of, cocoa or hot chocolate. It's like that beautiful conversation, that's back and forth responding nature. So 70% of the population are generators or manifesting generators. So most people are generators, and they are able to build and to have this sustainable energy. So they are designed for your 9-to-5 job, and they do have the energy to do that. But the key is to follow what they love. And if they don't, it can lead to frustration. And if they are really following that path that brings them joy, and they're really connecting back to that, it can lead to a lot of satisfaction. And there's nothing more satisfying to a generator than having, a job and a work that you love, and also relationships that are really fulfilling to you. When you have both of those, you are really following that path of alignment.
I love this. And I love generators. And I have to say, as an MG, knowing that I don't work exactly like generators, until I knew myself and fully accepted myself, I would actually get triggers by generators because I felt like I cannot operate the way how they do, and I'm expected to. And it's interesting, since I came into my own alignment, I love working with generators. Especially, I have this one generator in mind. She knows if she's listening. We were like such a good match. And that's exactly what you were mentioning at the beginning. Like when you get to meet and work closely with the other design, and you just both give each other the space to do what you're best in, it can be such a beautiful harmony. And one thing that I can imagine that a lot of generators might have a little bit of an issue with is exactly the people pleasing. I can totally see how you said that, because as you feel like, because you do have the energy, you have almost like no right to say no, because you still have the capacity for that. And that's definitely what I saw with my generator people. How could you help them somehow get through it, apart from experimenting? We already know that one. I love that one.
So it depends on their authority, really. I feel like that is a big thing. But if you are a generator, you are going to have your sacral defined. So we'll go with that, whether they've got sacral or whether emotional authority. It can only be one of those two, but they will have their sacral defined. And that's what defines a generator. And the manifesting generator difference is having the sacral to the throat connection. So you might still have your throat center defined. We're talking about the energy centers here, by the way. So it's similar to, different, you'd probably know the 7-centered chakra system. Most people would have heard of that. This is the 9-centered human design system. So there's 9 energy centers defined, and depending on what's defined is dependent on your authority, and your authority is your decision-making tool. So I thought I'd just explain that for people that are new to human design. So your sacral, I think of that as a battery, and it's this battery that can be depleted, and also you have the ability to have this consistent energy when you're following what lights you up. So if you are really not following what lights you up, if you are doing all of these tasks, the busy work, you can really drain the battery as well, and you can actually end up, which sounds counterintuitive in a way, but you can end up burning out just because you've even got that energy. So it's really important that you use that energy towards the things that you love. And I've forgotten your question, but I was going to go with that. Is that to do with making decisions?
Yeah, I forgot my question as well, but actually I love right now that you touched on the burnout, because that could be actually for generators quite hard to determine, right? Because they're not just they will still have the energy to keep going, but mentally they will feel burned out.
Yeah.
Could you?
So what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, what is coming up for me is that signature theme and the not self theme. So that not self theme of frustration, if you are constantly in that feeling of just going and not really looking after yourself, but looking after everyone else around you, which is quite common, it could lead to chronic frustration. And that's when something really needs to be changed, shifted in your life. You really need to assess what you could be doing differently. So you could start by, I love this example actually. One of my clients is a generator, and when we worked together, she really had said that she'd lost sight of what brought her joy. So after really understanding this, she went on a journey, and it was 33 days of joy. And every single day she did something that really lit her up, and it really started to connect her to her back to her sacral, and to really understand how to, because that was her authority, which is this yes, no. It's really asking yourself these yes, no questions, and it's a gut instinct. So if you get this gut instinct and it feels like this, yes, I'm going to do this, and it can be an energy that is quite, it's almost verbal. It can be and you could sort of, move forward. It feels quite expansive, or if it's a no. So it's really paying attention to the sacral. But yeah, she went on this journey, and over that time, she really connected to what brought her joy. And she started things like her own podcast. She decided she wanted to leave Melbourne, and she moved to Bali. And now she's living this completely different life. And she loves what she's doing, and she loves her life now. But she was going through the motions a little bit. So by really understanding human design, it's really had an impact on her life. And I've got so many different stories about how it's impacted people after they've really had a human design reading, or really dive deep into their design and started embodying it and experimenting with it. But yeah, I just love that.
Yeah, I really love that you brought this up, because I saw this so much when I was conducting job interviews. I was recruiter for a few years, and you really see when you have there a candidate who is lost. And it can be lost in not knowing where to go, and especially not knowing who they are. And I feel like part of understanding what brings you joy is the fact of understanding yourself, right? Knowing who you are. And even though I have been studying anything self-growth related for, I think, past 10 years, I think, the moment when I discovered human design, I started to realize but I really don't get it, because I really don't know how to listen to my own body and how to understand that intuition. And again, maybe because of my investigator side, and I feel like I need to understand completely the details, I took quite a few months from my journey to really just understand this yes-no gut response. And sometimes I really need to practice it in the most random everyday situation. So I would use it when going on walks. And every time when I had to change direction, I would try to understand where my body is pulling me, and really in the most basic places. But those basic places, and then I remember this moment. It's like a small thing, right? Small moment in life, but it was such a important one for me. When I was I feel like I want to stay on this side of the road. That makes no sense, because you then need to cross there. But I was no, I'm gonna listen to it. I'm just gonna stay here. And after a few, I don't know, 1 minute of walking, I've understood why my body told me that, because there was a construction on the other side of the road and I couldn't see it from there. And this was such an aha moment for me, because sometimes intuition can guide you somewhere where you logically feel like this makes no sense. And there is this, what you said, this experimental part where I could have said, hey, this is stupid. You know that there is no crossroad on that side. Just finally cross and, do what makes sense. And I loved practicing it on these small things, because it's and I remember I had this discussion with universe at this moment, thank you. I'm starting to get it. And then this also helps you to build a trust, right, over time with some bigger decisions.
Yes, I was just about to mention, it really builds that self-trust muscle, so to speak. It really allows you to have more belief to really follow that wisdom that's within inside you. And and I love that you're experimenting with it on the little things, because when you understand how your authority works, then you can experiment with it on the bigger things, the things that could be life-changing for you, you know, those huge, big decisions that we can often intellectualize and, you know, write the pros and cons list and all of the things, when really, you know, that wisdom is within you. The answers are within. You just need to trust, and you need to understand how that works. So yeah, I love how human design really bridges that. And it's just an empowering, I found it to be the most empowering system I found.
Exactly. Because I love the fact that it offers you the guidance, really like an instruction manual, right? To the tool then you can use. So if we would again bring back the GPS analogy, right? For generators, the moment they're feeling frustrated, they're not in alignment, headed the wrong direction. The moment when they're feeling dissatisfaction is the right direction. And what is their strategy? How would you define that one?
Their strategy is to wait to respond. And they're probably conditioned to initiate things into action. They can be met with a lot of resistance because of that. So it can be a real aha moment when they understand that they're designed to respond to others, to really pay attention to others, respond in the moment. So they might read something, and then that initiates that idea for them to respond to. They might respond to something. So for instance, just say they have an Instagram account. I mentioned sometimes with people that do, they might see an article that they feel passionately about. They can write about what they love about that, or what they strongly oppose about that. You know, just for an example, it's really responding to others in the moment, you know, responding and then coming up with what feels good, and then leaning into the authority. And it's also the signs and synchronicities, like you just mentioned. Like you mentioned, you cross the road because you're paying attention to what your body's feeling, and, you know, just those little signs. So yeah, there's so many different examples that you can give, but it's really, there's an element of waiting involved. But when you are aligned and when you really understand your strategy, it's quite flowy. There's not that much waiting involved. So it's really about surrendering to the flow of life more, rather than pushing and forcing things to happen.
Yeah. I'm so happy the way how you explained it, because I feel like that one can often be quite misunderstood.
Yeah.
And it may feel like, whoa, so I'm gonna just sit here for days and just wait, like and it can actually, from, as we discussed, right, it's such a tool that is empowering you, and suddenly it may feel like you're falling a victim to it. So I really enjoyed the way how you explained it, of like, what does it actually mean to wait to respond? That it doesn't have to be like, I'm gonna wait for the manifestor to come to me to initiate something.
Yeah. I think that's where people get stuck. You know, it's not supposed to be the next rule book for you to go, oh, I have to do this. I have to wait for the invitation. I can't take action. It doesn't mean you can't take action. It doesn't mean you can't, you know, send an email out, or, you know, if you've got, I mentioned like social media, but if you've got a social media following, you can sell to them. Or if there's people on your emailing list, if you've got a business, it doesn't mean you have to wait for an invite you can like create your own opportunities, basically, by showing up in your magnetism when you understand that. So yeah,
exactly,
it's supposed to be like liberating.
Yeah, and the same
set of rules.
Exactly. And the same would be in the workplace, right? It doesn't mean that you need to wait for your boss to come and tell you something.
Yeah.
Like there can be different things in the workplace that are going to initiate you into action, right? It can be exactly the fact that you see, I'm gonna say something random probably, but like, let's say that you are passing the part where people are making themselves coffee, like in a little kitchen or something, and you will realize that it's really messy there and that it's kind of disturbing, and you're just going to decide to put those 3 cups into the dishwasher. Already that is kind of like a response to something.
Yeah.
And then you might see that actually somebody from there sees you, appreciates it, and realize like, oh, they have these natural tendencies. Okay, that might lead to something else. And if this, in the moment, this is kind of like a response to you feeling like you want to respond to what you see, it doesn't have to be a person who's going to initiate you into action.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, as I mentioned, like really paying attention and just responding in the moment to what's around you, responding in the conversations that you're having, and really listening. And once you are listening and paying attention more, you'll notice that you're able to respond to a lot of different things, and it really sparks more opportunities for you when you do.
And it's fun. It feels like such a fun hunt for opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, you can even see, you know, a signpost or something, and it says, you know, a word, or it says like a number, or, you know what I mean? And you start seeing that number everywhere. Or you notice, if you like, another example is, I feel this is a bit more woo, but it's like, show me a sign sometimes, you know, like when you're feeling lost, or it's like, show me a sign. It's like, what could your sign be? But it could be, you know, you might say a feather, and then you keep seeing a feather each way, and that's going to lead you to what you are wanting to do. So you might be like, what am I going to price, you know, this offer or whatever it is. Then you keep seeing this number everywhere. You know, you see it on a billboard, you see it on the number plate in front of you, and it's like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to these signs that keep popping up for me and act on it. And, you know, it's just, it can be all sorts of different things. It doesn't have to be you know, just responding in the moment to the person in front of you. It's, yeah.
I love it. I love it. And you didn't mention that a generator can be sacral, have sacral authority, or emotional. What is that? What does it mean?
Yeah, so the emotional authority is, you still have, you know, the sacral sort of feeling, but it's really designed to wait for emotional clarity. So not making decisions in the moment. When someone asks you to make a big decision or to do something in the moment, you will let them know that you need time. You need time to sleep on it. It's that thing that you probably hear a lot, can I sleep on it? And that is the perfect thing for emotional authority. And then after you've had that, you know, you've had a little bit of time, then you can do a gut check, like a sacral gut check, to see if your gut is lit up by it. If it's something that you really want to do, if it's a hell yes, then you could go ahead and do it. But it is important that you take time, and that can be different for different people. It could be a day or two, you know, it's usually around that. And yeah, it's like you have different waves of authority. So if you say yes in the moment, you might be feeling the energy of the other and be really excited about it. But then when you get home, you're like, oh, actually, I don't really have the energy. I don't really want to do that. But now I've committed and I have to, you know. So rather than being seen as flaky, it's better to just say, I need time to think on it, and then make that decision afterwards. Yeah. In your own energy.
When you said gut check, I right away had like my response. So like, I love just the word for it. And I almost feel like it's something that you can put on a post-it and just put in front of your computer somewhere, just so or a place just that you see very regularly, so that when there is a decision that you're supposed to make, just kind of already to see it on the post-it, gut check, okay, how do I feel? And it's kind of like the constant reminder, and having there the post-it, then be able to respond to the post-it right again. And having that constant reminder of like, okay, coming back to my body, how do I feel? And I do actually something similar a lot with my clients when I'm trying to help to navigate their careers, right? And especially I was doing this with an emotional projector client, where she was so disconnected from her body and how she actually even feels, that she sometimes found out that, I know that if someone is listening right now, they cannot see what I'm going to do, but she found herself kind of like stuck like that in a lot of moments, and she couldn't just like kind of like relax her body and actually understand how her body is feeling. And when we did these kind of like small reminders in the places where she spends a lot of time, it really helped her come back to her body and check on how she's doing. And especially, again, exactly like not writing the emotions and understanding that you do not have to respond immediately. Within almost a week, she realized how much she is better understanding her body and her intuition, right? Coming back to the intuition. And it's really incredible. Like if you just become aware of these, that you have these tools, and you just see where you could implement it into your life in such a short period of time, if you really give it a little bit of attention, it can really be life-changing. And it's just amazing to see the changes in myself, in my close circle, and then in my clients. And obviously I am no human design expert, but you can still let people know, like make them aware of the tool for themselves. Because again, like I'm not a projector, right? I'm not a manifester. I'm not all of these other types. But because the information is available and you can pass it on to somebody else, it's just incredible to see them blossom.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's definitely amazing to bring that awareness to others, and just that you're using that in your, coaching as well, that you're looking up their charts and bringing awareness. I find that a lot of my clients end up doing that because they want to then understand the charts of everyone around them, so they can really understand how to get the best out of them if they're working with them as well.
That's one part. And second part, also understanding that I have been so conditioned myself to work a certain way. And now I understand that my way of helping others is to help them discover themselves. It's not to tell them like, oh, I make decisions like that, so that's how you should do it, because it has worked for me. And it's me, is a part of my deconditioning of not forcing my way of being on anyone else, and understanding that we are really truly all different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we do. You do hear the gut instinct a lot, and I guess that's a lot of people do have that. I think it's around 30-something percent, 37% or so, that have that sacral authority, which is the gut instinct. But that's sort of a term that you'd hear a lot. So if 100% of the population are doing that, it might not, be their authority. So they might not be making the decisions that are correct for them, which lead them to maybe the wrong opportunities,
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm so sorry. I'm going to disturb the episode just for a minute because I wanted to tell you about something really, really exciting going right now in the world of soul-led career. So a few days ago, I was running a very, very exciting workshop on the topic of building your best life and a career that supports it. In my world, I don't believe that it should be the other way around. We are here to live, and on top of that, we get to have a very, very fulfilling career that is going to support the lifestyle that we truly desire. And in this workshop, it was 1.5 hour amazing workshop, it was so cool. And we got to discover together with the participants about what it is that they actually truly want from life. Because often we have been conditioned into what we think that we should have, what we think that success is, what we think that being rich is. And the moment when we decide to decondition from that and actually peel off the layers of that metaphorical onion, we realize that we might be living someone else's idea of success. And maybe we have been running after something that we don't actually want. So we get to the place when we finally realize what is it that we want. And this is the best place to start building your new life and new career from. So I'm inviting you to join that workshop as well. Even though it was already live and it's recorded, you can still get the replay for free. And I'm so excited for you to go and dive deep into that. Just go and visit the link in the description of this podcast episode and go ahead, enjoy. So we have covered generators. I think this was a very nice dive into that aura type. What next one would you like to discuss?
We'll do manifesting generators next, because they are really a subtype of the generator, but with some manifestor qualities. So we've been over both of those other types. So manifesting generators, as I mentioned, they've got the sacral defined and the throat connection as well, which gives them that sustainable energy like a generator. And they have the same not self and signature themes as well. But the difference is that they can move a lot faster. And so they are a bit like the manifestor in that way. They can move quite quickly. So it can be important for them to also inform as well, actually. And they are very, rather than like having this mastery of skill in terms of having just one niche, it could be in their work, but they will need to have hobbies as well, or in their work that gives them area to play with their multipassionate, nature of theirs. I call them the multipassionate multitaskers. They're able to do a lot of things and a lot of things at once, and that actually feels good to them. But there may be conditioning for them as a child that, they should follow a linear path, and that they should stick to one thing. Otherwise, they might be seen as, all over the place. And because of that, they may really hold back on following that multi-passionate nature of theirs. So once they realize that and bring awareness to that, and that it's okay to do lots of things at once, and that can really be satisfying, then that's going to bring them a lot more joy as well, rather than, following that linear path because they feel like they should. But essentially, they will have the same not self theme of frustration that will come up if they are, following that linear path perhaps, or if they are trying to initiate, like the manifestors, and just initiate all the time without responding, without waiting to respond. That can be met with that same frustration as well. And in terms of their signature theme of satisfaction, it's also similar to the generators in the fact that they are really surrendering to that flow and really following what lights them up, and really reminding themselves and, connecting back with their sacral as well. And just like I mentioned, they may have, like with the generator, their authority can only be sacral, the gut instinct, or the emotional, which is waiting for emotional clarity. So it'll be one of those two things. So yeah, it's similar in a lot of ways to the generator, but in terms of having, not one niche, in terms of having multiple things in a day that they do, and that will really feel great to them. So if they can have, if they're looking for a job, that has an area for them to be able to follow different tasks in a day rather than just one thing. Of course, it's amazing to focus on one thing at a time, but it's to be able to play and not be sort of, you're really restricted. It can feel quite restricting for a manifesting generator to be doing the one thing day in, day out. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you have just talked to my inner child.
Oh.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, especially because, again, because of the energy that we as MGs that we have, you can feel a little bit forced to be in the generator way of being, where again you have the energy to be, like, let's say, in a typical 9 to 5, in a typical corporate. And I definitely do not want to say that in such a place there cannot be space for MGs, because of course MB depends on the company, depends on the position, everything. But it's from personal experience, I can definitely say that it's interesting to play with that, because it was the fact that I am multi-passionate. It always made me feel so guilty, especially, again, being brought up by a generator parent. I've kept constantly hearing, I'm going to put it in quotes, their truth of how to live. So that's then, of course, part of the conditioning of, like, you need to concentrate on one thing and stuck with it. And then exactly, it would make me feel flaky if I discovered that, like, oh, I want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. And of course, it also gives me perspective on how I would like to raise my kids, again, with the awareness of human design in the future. And also how, if I were to be a manager of somebody else, how I would like to support their own energy from the understanding of I did not feel supported growing up, and also often not feeling supported in a workplace. But then there is also this part of kind of like finding the balance of wanting to follow your own guidance, but also understanding that it still needs to work within the workplace. So either finding your way around it, or maybe looking for that job, that company that is going to allow you actually being in your element.
Yeah, I do notice that there's a lot of manifesting generators who are entrepreneurs, because they are able to really have the ability to, follow whatever they want to do. It gives them a lot more autonomy to, follow different paths and create lots of things, and be creative and work with different people. So not to say that you have to, but it is maybe looking for a job that does have a lot of creative elements to it, and maybe somewhere where they do have the ability to be able to make decisions in a way without having to, without able to, move in different directions without having to just follow that path. So, and another thing that I love to mention is that manifesting generators, like generators, they have a very warm and inviting energy, and they're very magnetic. So you probably find that people are quite drawn to you because of that. People want to be in your energy as well. So it's really about owning that energy and knowing that. And the more that you sort of step into your power and own that energy, the more people are going to, look to you for that, the energy and the power and everything that you have to offer. They're going to see you as someone that has a lot of, visionary qualities about them.
It's so interesting because I can relate to what you're saying. And at the same time, I used to have a lot of fear around it. I wasn't actively aware of it, but I always felt exhausted by people. And I felt like, why do they want to keep being around me? Why are they texting me? Why are they doing this? And then I understood that I'm actually just in the wrong space, because around the right people, either they understand that I need my space, or it just doesn't feel, like it's killing me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and especially I feel like, and that's for sure gonna be for every type, but for somebody maybe heightened, that when you're around these like energetic vampires, that it can make you question yourself, especially even like right with this, right now, knowing that I do have that energy and so on, and I'm thinking like, but why am I feeling so exhausted around this? And then you're realizing, oh, okay, because I actually said yes to something I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Very interesting when you start finding these things out.
Yeah, it's like the layers that you build upon, because, next you'd look at, which we don't have time for today, but next you'd sort of, I'm thinking as you're saying that, if I had your chart to look at, the centers that are defined, so the different gates that could come up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of clues into why, because it's very nuanced. So I'm giving you, basically each of the types generalized, but there's a lot of nuances when you go into it that you can look into, because not all manifesting generators are going to be the same. So there might be a manifesting generator that has quite different chart to yours. So they might feel more in that energy of, showing up and, in that magnetism. You might feel like you need more alone time, but that might be because there's certain areas of your chart.
Yeah.
You might have defined, one of the centers, which is to really reflect and retreat and to have time alone and to be still. There might be certain aspects of your chart that shows that. So yeah, that's sort of another element when you dive a lot deeper.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that you mentioned that, because I feel like when it comes to human design, or for somebody else it could be astrology, whatever field it is, that people might feel like, oh, of course you want to put us into five types of people, right? Into 12 astrology, zodiac signs, whatever. Like, that's not how it is. That's not how it works. So I love that you're then talking about the details, but at the same time, kind of like, yeah, when it comes to the aura types, you feel a certain stuff inside of your body that can help you guide, yet it's not a thing that it tells you that you need to do this and that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really giving you insight into those types, and that's what we're doing now. And I feel like a lot of people do relate to it after they get over the initial, printing out their type and going, oh, I didn't expect to be that. Or some people really have the aha moment, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's why I feel like this. And I always thought that I was, trying to keep up with a different type. And now I know my design, I can really lean into that more and harness that energy. And, others really straight away will feel like a real, affinity with their type. So yeah, it's about understanding that. But once you understand what your type is, and, have a little bit of time to really feel into that, and once you print it out, if you're doing that today, and then after that, you'll probably start to really resonate with some of these that we're talking about now.
Definitely. So let's move on to the next step.
We'll do projectors next.
Let's do projectors. Yeah.
So I'm a projector. So projectors are really here to guide energy. So a lot of conditioning for projectors can be around, and particularly for me as well, I had been living my life more as a generator, really trying to keep up with the generators around me, working long hours, working past my energetic capacity. So sometimes I'd end up working longer than the generators that I work with, staying back longer because I couldn't switch off. I didn't know when enough was enough energetically. So in a workday, they would leave and then I'd continue working because of that. So if you're not aware of that, over time, you can really, it can be something that you can work with in your 20s. You can absolutely still keep up just because of your youth. But once you get to your 30s and 40s and beyond, it's something that can lead to chronic burnout if you're not aware of it, if you just keep pushing yourself to keep up with the others. And it's not to say that you don't have energy. The projectors are the most nuanced of the type. You can have the most authorities and a lot of different combinations of projectors. And so there's a lot of nuances there, but generally speaking, they don't have the consistent energy that the generators and the manifesting generators that we've spoken about have. So it's really important that for them to, I kind of have it as waiting for the energy to rise. So rather than, if I'm thinking about me working, at home, I've got a business that I work from home essentially most of the time, I will make sure that I really use my energy efficiently. And a big part of that is energetic maintenance. So I take priority in self-care, looking after myself, exercising daily, eating the right foods to show up in the most magnetic way. And for projector, it is a lot about the way that you're showing up and the energy that you're showing up in, having self-belief and really recognizing yourself for your gifts and strengths. So projectors have this aura that's really focused on the others, so they can really see the gifts and the strengths and the highest potential of everyone around them. Sometimes they don't see it in themselves. So it can be that they really can see others deeply, but there's a lot of confusion when it comes to what their gifts are and strengths are. That's one thing that human design has really allowed me to articulate mine. So I feel like I sort of say in a job interview, if I was to have a job interview previously to knowing and really understanding my human design, I would really have to sort of think about what my strengths are and what my gifts are and how I can really be the best potential candidate. Now I could articulate with confidence and clarity by understanding my design and working with it, what my gifts are and strengths are. And it's not necessarily going to be the most energetic output, but it's going to be to see things that could be done more efficiently and to guide people and systems as well. So if I think back to every single job I've ever had, and this resonates with a lot of projectors, because the projectors are the ones, it's the self-projected channels that are the leadership channels in human design, as well as one of the manifested channels. But you wouldn't necessarily think of the projectors as being the traditional leader, whereas they are actually designed to lead. And every job I've ever gone into, I've never gone for a leadership role. And within a few months, I've ended up being a leader or a manager or a trainer or elected in some sort of leadership role, because I'd go in straight away and start sort of saying how things could be done more efficiently and creating new systems of doing things and new ways of working in workflows. And then the system would work a lot better. And then, other people would see that. And that would end up being, and then I'd end up training a lot of people into how to do things in a more efficient way. So I'd end up being the trainer of all the new staff that would come in. So in that way, they are these natural guides and these natural leaders, whereas they need to be elected into this position. They're not necessarily going in and going, I'm the leader. It's just that others, when you recognize yourself for your gifts and strengths, then others recognize you. And then that's when you end up really being in the right place for you, for your natural gifts. So that leads to, when you're really following that leads to that feeling, and that success theme of alignment is this feeling of success. And that success can come from being invited to things, being recognized, being really seen and valued for what you have to share, and being asked for your opinion on things, because you have some really great opinions and ways of doing things. And what I see happens with a lot of projectors before they understand this, because they're trying to initiate, they're trying to keep up, and they're really burnt out and bitter. And bitter is their not self theme. When they're not in alignment, it can also be resentment as well. But when you're heading in a direction, when you're not feeling aligned, and when you're trying to keep up, when they're also that feeling of scarcity as well, and just sort of, why isn't it working for me? Why is it working for everyone else? Why are other people able to do all of these things? And I feel exhausted at the thought of it. So when you are getting into the right positions, the right roles in your career, that's when a projector can really shine, and that's when they can lead and have, be invited to the most amazing opportunities. So yeah, that's sort of how the projector energy works. It's a little bit different to the others in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And it was quite difficult for me to grasp in the beginning to understand really the projectors, and I still am more in a place where I can, of course, because I'm not a projector, so I don't fully get it. Like I understand it intellectually. And it was interesting. We were discussing with my projector client the fact of what does the success mean, right? Like, because she has been so disconnected from her body for all of those years, and it was difficult. I was trying to get her to feel into it through like various of methods, but how would you, from the position of a projector, to be able to explain, because when you say success in the sense of somebody invites you somewhere, you feel recognized, but how do we know that we are going as a projector into the right direction before that recognition comes? What isn't some kind of like an inner feeling of the success?
I feel like that really depends on the authority in some ways, in terms of, going into the right opportunities and making those right decisions. But generally speaking, that feeling of success, it can be monetary, yes, but it's a lot of it is to do with when you are really feeling seen and heard and valued. And that recognition can come even in this form of, you reaching out to me and saying what you liked about seeing the TikToks, that you really enjoyed watching those. And then the invitation came. If I was to receive an invitation without any form of recognition, I might not accept it. Do you know what I mean? There's a recognition element to it. So if you are inviting a projector, or if you work with a projector, words of affirmation are huge. That's their love language. So they need you to say, wow, you're doing an amazing job. And while other types may not need that recognition, they are going to perform so much better. You're going to get the best out of them if you are praising them, if you are saying genuinely what you see their talents are and what they're doing amazingly in their job role. Then they're going to be the most dedicated, loyal, employees.
It's so interesting to me, because it's one of those things where I love that you mentioned love language, right? Because it's very like the way how to look at it is you receive a certain way, right? You like to give a certain way, but then there's the part of understanding how someone around you is to be able to give them what they need. And it might be something that doesn't come to you naturally. And then you kind of like need to get to a mode where you learn that, right? About others to know that. And I feel like, again, it comes from the understanding of self, the fact that you realize that you feel a certain way when somebody gives you what you like to receive. And that kind of, then you feel like you actually want to mirror it on the others and also make them feel seen, make them feel recognized, make them feel calm, at peace, happy, whatever it is that they like to receive. I would be curious, you mentioned a lot that they could easily burn out. What does a burnout for a projector look like? How they can maybe recognize some signs that it might be potentially coming?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I find a lot is, as I mentioned, keeping up and really understanding that there is a point where you need to know, like, your own energetic maintenance, to say no and to switch off, and to, even at home, like for an example, my husband's a generator, my daughter's a generator, and my son's a manifesting generator. So that's a lot of energy for me. And with that, before I knew that, they'd come in and I might have been, doing a certain task, but I would be getting up and running around, following them, doing things, and sort of not being aware of that energy. And then they'll go to bed at night, that sacral battery will be off and they'll be asleep, and I'll be running around doing chores and writing lists and, all that sort of stuff, because I didn't know how to switch off. And if you're constantly like staying up too late, not getting enough sleep, like, it's really important for projectors. They talk about napping, and some do, nap in the day, but generally speaking, it's just about getting that good quality sleep at night. And that's a huge thing. So I think if we are sort of, rather than just looking at the burnout, is what can prevent the burnout, is to really understand the energy, and to know that with their sleep, they need to go to sleep before like go to bed before they're exhausted. If they just keep going to the point of exhaustion, falling asleep on the couch, having poor quality sleep, it's a really bad cycle for reflectors to be in. So maintaining their energy is probably the most important thing if they're going to have that signature theme of success, because they're not going to be showing up in a powerful way, and they're going to be seen and recognized if they're not getting the sleep, exercise, you know, the quality, all these qualities that they need. So it's a real cycle. But if they're constantly having poor sleep, constantly saying yes to things that are depleting their energy and trying to keep up with everyone else and not really understanding that, then that is a fast track to burnout. And that burnout can be over a long period of time, because it can be, if you're, you know, in your 30s and 40s and you've been trying to keep up, and then all of a sudden you actually, you know, it can lead to, you know, your body to sort of start giving you the signs of illness and things like that. So it is really important for you to understand your energy so you can prevent that burnout from happening. But I do say that a lot. And projectors over time sometimes end up being in different positions as well, different roles. So potentially a role for you as a projector, if you're listening, like not to have a role where the output is measured, and not to have a role where it's just you've got a clock of all of these tasks that need to be done in a certain time. You can actually get things done quicker than others in a lot of ways, but you need to wait for the timing to be right. So so if you're measured on your hours a day, you could get the same amount done, but in a 2 or 3 hour time, when the energy is right for you, when you're feeling the pull to do it, and you just type. And I do that as well. But if I'm to sit at a desk for 8 hours, I might have a lot less output because I'm being, you know, forced to do in that way. So it's really about, you know, looking after the energy, and then you can actually do things more efficiently. So that's what they're masters of efficiency, projectors.
That's really good, because I feel like even just what you said, I'm not a projector, and I felt this permission to work with the energy that they have, right? And very efficiently, in a way of not having that guilt that someone else, maybe generators, right, can sit at the table for 8 to 10 hours just going like that, not changing the way how they are. They still have energy and so on, and you don't. And then you might feel guilty, because sometimes I feel like people often, if they have certain gifts of, let's say, the same work that someone can do in 8 hours, they can do in 4 hours, and they might feel guilty about that. So kind of like part of this experiment, learning how to be slowly releasing that guilt and just like letting go of it, and instead just being proud of who they are and how they can manage to work, it can be such a huge release.
Yeah. So in you saying that, it's almost if you had a, you know, been given an assignment that you need to do by a certain date, a projector could absolutely do that. And they might do it, but they might do it at the midway point, or they might, you know, do it all in a certain area. So if they're measured on an hourly rate per day, that's not going to be great for them, because their output's going to be different, but they will still have that job done at the same rate as anyone else by the end, you know, if they just have the time and space to do it. But if it's, you know, a daily thing, it could be really forcing them to, you know, their nervous system to be shot, because they're trying to do things in a certain way, in a certain time period, if it's too quick.
Amazing. Let's move on to reflectors.
Yeah. So last is the reflectors. And they actually only make up 1% or less than 1% of the population. So they're actually known as the unicorns, because they're so rare. So, you know, it's something that if you know a reflector, or if you know, look up charts afterwards and see that there's a reflector in your life, it's really amazing to really understand them. And I have a good friend who's a reflector, and I've had a couple of reflector clients that I've worked with over long periods, one-to-one. So I feel like I have got to know the energy quite well. And a big thing for them is that they are these mirrors. So they really reflect back wisdom to others. So they really need to be seen as, you know, the wisdom givers that they are. So a lot of time that they need to recognize that as well, and to be really around the right people and around in the right environments really allows them to flourish the most. And as I mentioned before, they really are amazing overseeing things, at being impartial, having an impartial view at things and seeing the overview of things. So if they're in a different position, like it is said that they make the most amazing judges in courts for their impartial view and their ability to really be able to oversee things and to not have, the partial, having that opinion and really being able to overlook it in that way. And, my friend who's a reflector, she's really in human resources, and she's able to see how a lot of things from a safety perspective can be done more efficiently. And everyone comes to her for that overview and that insight. So for reflectors, in terms of their not self themes, it's really this disappointment. That is what comes up when you're not in alignment. And that can really be felt for a reflector when they are trying to be forced to make decisions too quickly. And that is not in alignment with them. They are lunar beings. So their strategy and their authority is actually very different to the others. It's based on the moon, and it's based on that lunar cycle. So it's about waiting, obviously not for short, small decisions, like what you're going to have for dinner, but for these big life-changing decisions, it's about waiting around that 29-day lunar cycle. So it's really about, similar to the emotional authority, but longer, really understanding that you're not here to be rushed to make a decision. And if you are making decisions rushed, if people are forcing you to, and if you're not saying I need a bit of time to make that decision, that can be really lead you to disappointment. And then when you are in your signature theme, when things are really flowing for you, when you are allowing yourself the time to make decisions without being pressured, and you are able to really, follow the things that you're really loving doing, it really leads to that signature theme of surprise and delight, because things turn out better than you could have ever imagined or anticipated. So it's that beautiful thing there for reflectors. So that's just the main thing. And also being around the right people. So it's really important for them to have the right people on board if they're in an office, to be with, people that really are there to support them. And they're going to they have a lot of openness in their chart. So they don't have any energy centers defined. So those 9 centers are all white. So they can really pick up on the energy around them a lot. So that's why being in the right environment and being around the right people are really crucial for them in their life, to really that signature theme for them as well.
Wow.
It's a little bit of a harder one to get your head around, the reflector. It is different.
Yeah. And I can already sense how it might be challenging for someone who is a reflector, who is in an environment with a lot of people who are really fast paced and are moving super quickly. So I can imagine that the reflector in our household would be really confused. But and I can imagine that it can be difficult, right? If you really have to, I don't want to say to have to, but kind of, yes, in some big major decisions, you have to wait almost a month to make a decision, and being only next to people who can, I can make decision within a minute, right? For me. So I can also imagine that me and a reflector could be kind of frustrated with each other. They would be disappointed, I would be frustrated.
Yes.
It's interesting, but at the same time, how would you define what is the right type of environment when you say it's important to have the right people around you, whether it is to how you can educate your environment as a reflector about how you work and kind of how you need to be supported. Do you have kind of a specific advice for them maybe?
Yeah, well, something that I feel is important for them is, and what I've sort of, chatted a lot, is about having an environment that feels really good in terms of decluttered, getting rid of all of the clutter around. If they've got an office from home, if they've got an office in a workplace, to have a place that's theirs that feels really good to them. So if they create that sanctuary there, if they have the things around them, whether it's photos, crystals, candles, whatever it is, that feels really good for them, so they're heading into that environment and a place that feels really inviting, that definitely does help as well. And in terms of a practical example in terms of people, I have a friend that has worked with someone that has, I guess, had a lot of energy in terms of that didn't feel aligned for them. So they ended up spending more time working at home because they were able to be in the right environment for them. And this person it was almost an energy, because they've got so much openness. They can really feel that energy of others and take it on and amplify it at times. Although that is, reflectors have a lot less conditioning than others in terms of that. So if it was a projector that has 2 energy centers defined and the rest is open, they have the potential to have a lot more conditioning, because the aura of a reflector, it actually reflects. So it actually is not going to take on as much, if that makes sense. You're not going to take on as much of the energy around them. So that is one thing. And another thing in terms of advice I give is to keep a journal and to track, your decision making. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take you the full 29 days to make a decision. You might find that in this cycle of you journaling and understanding the phases of the moon as well, if it's a new moon, it might mean that might be a time that you're able to make decisions more potentially. So you might find that it might only be 2 weeks for you to really, and when you're writing in your diary, like if it's a big decision, just say, changing jobs or moving countries, you could write down how you're feeling each day and how that changes. And if you're finding that every day over a week, it's just the same thing, that's a really good indication that that's the right decision for you. So don't feel, I've got to wait 29 days now. I don't want to give you any rules. It's just about understanding that you need more time, and that time could be slightly different for different people.
So good. And this is such a good way, the journaling, which you just mentioned, it's such a good way to getting to know yourself, right? Especially when you really get into it and you realize that you are journaling freely, because I feel like that's also part of the practice, that at the beginning you're like, what am I supposed to write? Like, dear diary.
And that's the head. That shows that it's in the mind as well when you're doing that. And then when it's coming from, the heart, it's a different flow of words that come out, isn't it? When you're allowing yourself that time and space to.
Yeah, I love it. This was amazing. This was such a good way of looking at each of the types. As we were talking about at the beginning, both of us being people who need to, when they want to get in a topic, really want to go deeply into it and look at the details. This episode has even personally me giving so much clarity. You were mentioning your podcast to me before, so let's tell people how they can find you to maybe be able to actually go in even more deeper on each of the types.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually doing a session at the moment of a series of each of the not self themes for each of the types, where I really dive in deep into each of them. So I'm part of the way through that at the moment. So it might be a good time, if this fascinates you, to dive in deeper. But my podcast is called Magnetic by Design, a human design podcast. So it's solo episodes, really imparting, a lot of education around human design. But I also interview a lot of people in business as well, and a lot of my clients as well. So it's really how they have resonated with their design and how that's given them, that permission slip to be authentically them, to really step into their power more. So it's quite inspiring and uplifting and activating in that way. So I'm on there sporadically as a projector. It can be weekly or bi-weekly, but when they come, that's when they're meant to. And I'm also on Instagram at Nicole Towers _ And I've got in my link in my bio, and also in my podcast show notes, you'll see I have a freebie which has really resonated with a lot of people. And that's really diving into the strategy. So it's called Aligned Strategies by Design, but it's really to do with the business. So it's aligned business strategies. So it gives you a little bit insight into each of the types. And as we mentioned, going into their strategy and how they can work with that in business. But like today, it is, we're going into not the nuances. So if it's something that you really resonate with, but you want, my eyes to look at your chart and to really dive deep, because that's what I really love to do, then I also do human design readings. So I do them through business, or human design readings for a foundational reading as well, and blueprints as well. So really diving into all of the amazingness of your chart. And so you can really walk away feeling empowered. And it's such a beautiful thing. And I love doing readings.
Yeah, it's amazing. And especially mentioning the blueprint, I had my blueprint done recently as well. And it's really because all of this can be a lot to take in, because exactly, we just scratched really just the surface of what all of this means. And then when you actually get like the blueprint of mine has like 40 pages, right? And you realize how, wow, okay, this makes sense because of this gate and this defined or undefined center. And it just makes so much sense. And I almost really feel like just studying yourself, plus it's really my hobby to study myself, but really I feel like it can be like a lifelong process to constantly going deeper and deeper and more in alignment. So having such a tool is so useful. I'm definitely going to link it in the description of this episode, because I'm sure someone after this will want to go and get this blueprint from you or just listen to your podcast. Nicole, thank you so much. This was really lovely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here.
Absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much.